beginning to the Sermon on the Mount, sometimes they seem sort of like a checklist of things we need to do in order to be blessed. For some of these things, that's not so bad. Be merciful. I can try to do that. Okay, sometimes it might be hard, but I can try. Be pure in heart, having selfless, undivided intentions. Okay, that's a good thing. I might fail at that a lot, but that's really a good thing. Be a peacemaker. Except that being a peacemaker doesn't mean sitting around singing Kumbaya all day. It means actually getting out and struggling for peace. But I can get behind that. But can I be honest with you all? Some of these other ones, I don't really want to be poor in spirit or mourn or to be meek. And I really don't want to hunger and thirst for righteousness or to be persecuted for the sake of righteousness. And I really don't want people to revile me and persecute me and utter all sorts of evil against me. If these are the entrance requirements to the kingdom of heaven, I'm not sure if I want to go. Maybe I can go hang out in a medium place instead. This is why it's important to read our scripture in context. It helps it to be a little bit less scary and to make, hopefully, a whole lot more sense. We remember that in Luke's version of the Beatitudes, Luke is firmly social justice-y. Luke is one who will call us out on our stuff if we are focusing too much inward on just what matters to us, or if we are admiring the rich and haughty who are totally out of touch with the rest of the world's needs. That was his context. His audience needed to hear about the importance of caring for the poor and the oppressed and welcoming those the rest of the world has turned their backs on. Matthew's has a different audience. That doesn't negate Luke's version, Luke's focus on the Beatitudes, but it gives us another emphasis, an additional way of hearing these Beatitudes, these blessings. Matthew was writing to a group who were probably in Palestine. They had just witnessed the first Jewish revolt crushed. Many of their friends and family and neighbors either killed or taken away as slaves. They watched the temple in Jerusalem destroyed by the Romans. That was the center of Judaism. And when that was destroyed, along with it was most of their feelings of safety and security. And so when we hear blessed are the poor in spirit, we know that spirit in Greek also translates to breath. And so this doesn't necessarily mean, as some people think, blessed are those who have weak faith. Maybe. But imagine more those who have felt kicked in the gut so hard that they can't catch their breath. They are gasping for air. They just can't breathe. Imagine those who are grieving for all of their loved ones who are gone. Along with them, their world as they knew it. And they feel powerless, hopeless, helpless. Imagine these people that Matthew is talking to who have had their world torn apart. They have been persecuted because of what they believe, because of what they have faith in. You see, these Beatitudes, they're not just a checklist of things for us to do. They're a checklist of things that have been done and continue to be done. And there's a promise in there that in the midst of all of this is somehow the kingdom of heaven. And I think it's a list we can all relate to. When we hear about blessings in this passage, some do translate it as happy, as we heard in the kid talk. But I'm not sure that happiness is always the best way to translate blessing in this particular passage. Personally, to me, it seems a little sadistic if you think about it. But blessings also means one has found favor with God, that God is with them. How much more sense does this poetry from the gospel sound if we hear it? God is with you when you are devastated, when you are grieving, when you feel scared and alone and lost. God is with you when your whole world has been torn apart. And God is with you when you struggle for justice, when your heart breaks for others, when you work to bring peace. I think that most of us have been there in one way or another. We've been in places where we have felt like we were drowning in hopelessness and cried out for God's presence. Sometimes it's when we look out into the outer world, when we see natural disasters like floods and fire and earthquake and famine, when we see the lack of clean water and oil spills and rainforests being destroyed and global warming and mass pollution, we call out for God. And when we also look out in the world, we call out for God's presence when we see things like refugees forced to run for their lives without any safe place to go. when we see the effects of terrorism, when we hear about 300 girls who were kidnapped from their school years ago now, who still haven't been brought home, when we hear about sex trafficking and slave trade that still happens today, when we hear about religious persecution and persecution because of one's sexual orientation or gender identity or prejudice because of the color of one's skin. And we cry out to God in our own lives when we are dealing with our own health crises and when the medical test results aren't that which we had hoped for. We call out when we experience joblessness or underemployment or feeling like we're getting the short end of the stick again. We call out when we are grieving, when we are lonely, when we are dealing with mental health issues, when we have to deal with abuse or family tension. We keep crying out, God, we need your presence. You know, Jeff, one of our council members, gave me permission to share that this past week, when two men broke into his home and he was laying on the ground at gunpoint, he cried out to God in prayer. And then he wasn't afraid because he knew that God was present with him. He knew that he was blessed. You see, as Christians who are living in the midst of the kingdom of heaven, being blessed doesn't mean that everything's going to go our way, or that we have this invisible force field protecting us from all possible evil or harm. It doesn't mean that when we struggle for justice and work for peace, trying to do the right thing, that it will be easy for us. In fact, it may be harder because we're trying to do the right thing, because so many work against us. Matthew's gospel that we hear today shares with those who have had their world torn apart and shares with us Jesus' promise that when these things happen, not if, because chances are they will happen, but when they happen, the good news is that God is present with us. God is there loving us, never leaving us, because we are blessed. And this is the kingdom of heaven. And that is reason enough to rejoice. Amen.